Gutenberg invented the printing press in 1440, not long after he started to publish books and Bibles so that people could read what others had to say. Without this, it was really hard to find books and practice reading new things. Now there are a lot of books being printed by the printing press. People are read books, and some people like to read instead of writing up to a 60,000 word book. They can now print it. This means we have less time writing books and spend more time with our family and friends. Now we can read a lot of books and learn from them too. There's also the newspaper, which gives us information and keep us up to date with things around the world.
All of these buildings were built in Italy, where the Renaissance started. This architecture, along with the Renaissance itself, spread all through Europe and some other parts of the world. The Renaissance started more specifically in Italy, in Florence, Italy. The many trade routes coming and going through Italy. Also, Italy was a large peninsula, and so there were many Mediterranean trade routes. Also, the newly developed printing press helped spread news of the Italian Renaissance. The Renaissance spread to many places in Europe, including France, Germany, Spain, and England. There was a huge burst of culture from the Renaissance with all the art during that time. The art usually had a humanist style adopted from the Renaissance. Artists include Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael. Some famous paintings include The Creation of Adam, the Mona Lisa, The Last Supper, and many other works. Architecture of the Renaissance saw the revival of ancient Greek and Roman architecture. This focused a lot on symmetry, proportion, geometry, and regularity of parts. Some famous works of the Renaissance include the Florence Cathedral, St. Peter's Basilica, Basilica di San Lorenzo, and Santo Spirito. All of these buildings were built in Italy, where the Renaissance started. This architecture, along with the Renaissance itself, spread all through Europe and some parts of the world. The Renaissance started more specifically in Florence, Italy. The many trade routes coming through and going through Italy.
The Renaissance had some economic significance. As intellectual life flourished, many universities specializing in research and advanced teaching were built. These intellectual people were able to invent new ideas and inventions that greatly helped the economy. A few examples are the stock exchange and joint stock companies that protected shareholders' money. The era's passion for science and technology held the potential for improving economic performances. The Renaissance also had a major impact on the growing middle class in Western Europe. Members of this class spent much of their time reading newspapers and books that furthered their knowledge. This broadening of the intellectual audience overwhelmed traditional institutions of censorship. New public venues like the thousands of coffee houses and tea shops of cities and market towns also became locations to discuss scientific discoveries, new technologies, and controversial works on human nature and politics. The Renaissance sparked a higher order and sophistication in the economies of the world. The Renaissance had a large political significance. The Renaissance was a period of flourishing intellectual activity. Many intellectuals challenged political institutions and sought to find ways of how the government could be better regulated and more productive to bring their supposed purpose of life, liberty, and property. The Renaissance also sparked reason and evidence which undermined the church authority in government affairs. The traditional ways of government was being evaluated by intellectuals ready for change. Monarchs embraced it as a way to expand their power. They would befriend the certain intellectuals and use them as allies to fight against the church power. In some cases, this worsened political institutions since they could get away with being corrupt with nobody to limit their power. The Renaissance marked the start to the modernization of governments across the world.
During the Renaissance, the Black Plague was going on, making people more familiar with death and had them dwell more about their life on Earth. This also made the food and land values drop The new views of humanism developed against the Christians' beliefs, which was strange because most of the new art was in dedication to the Catholic Church. The Renaissance began in times of religious turmoil. Churchmen such as Erasmus and Luther proposed to reform the church in various ways.
knowledge and information becoming more easily distributed and more available. This was due to the Gutenberg press. People began reading and as a result had an increased wish to learn and a rise in literacy. People became smarter and as a result published maps, discoveries, and charts. In addition, published legal information that made people better understand their rights. People changed their views on how life should be lived and began questioning political and religious structures.
Oh, Martin Luther nailed 95 theses to the door of the church in Germany to complain about the problems of the church. Oh, not a lot of people liked the church. It wasn't doing a very good job, so most of them agreed with him.
In 1559, Queen Elizabeth I ruled England without asking for 45 years and proved to the world that women are just as strong and smart as men are if they receive the same education. I think that was a big accomplishment for someone in her time to do because of all the illnesses and deaths. Now people know that women are smart and brave and can be as successful as any man. Women can get the same jobs and can do just as well because they are treated the same as men. This means that now women are in a tea property like people thought they were before. So, without powerful women, like Elizabeth I, women could still be what they were like in the Renaissance.
All over the Renaissance? They made people fear the church to get more Christians. They made people rethink the church because if lots of people are anti-Catholic then something must be wrong with it. Now people can be all different religions and we can see that in truth the church was corrupt and that the church learned from their mistakes and now people can be whatever they want to be, which makes the people happy because they did not have to worry about their religion because they did not care. 18.75 All throughout the Renaissance people were discovering new things about medicine. People started to learn more about the body, the way it worked, and what was inside. New cures were found and new ideas were formed about what happens to the body. This way we know how to help new lives and we know how to end lives painlessly. We use that knowledge to increase our own so that people are safer and we can help them more. Without the studies that the people did that we would have never found a cure to the things that we are facing right now. But since they did it we saved lots of lives and we can stay healthy too. Brian, 1 minute there was a huge burst of culture from the Renaissance with all the art during that time. The art usually had a humanist style adopted from the Renaissance.
So all in all, the Renaissance was in the 1400th century. The Renaissance was the time when the people started to break away from Catholicism, and they started thinking outside the box, especially in art. The breaking away from the Catholic Church was made by Martin Luther, and it was known as the Protestant Reformation. The period of time after the Middle Ages is known as the European Renaissance, and it was called the time of rebirth in actions because new developments began to take place in most areas of culture and society. Writers of this period spoke of rebirth and renewal of culture, broadly that of classical antiquity, after they saw as barbarism of the intervening centuries. The Renaissance was essentially a cultural movement which encompassed a revival of learning based on classical sources which were being rediscovered. Also, the development of a linear perspective in painting and gradual widespread educational reform affected the manner in which people viewed and interacted in the world. This had an impact not only in the art and architecture, but also in the fields of science, rhetoric, literature, and music. As a time of rebirth and action beginning in Italy with stirrings are traceable to the 13th century of the late Middle Ages, the movement proper spanned the countries from 14th to the 17th centuries and later began spreading the rest of Western Europe. While Renaissance is a very general term to describe this era of history, there is no doubt that intellectuals and secular developments took place. So did gradual progress in technology along with improvements in husbandry and farming. This was activated an increased number of people who left the land to live in the cities. The European Renaissance was a time, what the Renaissance did was split the church in two major regions, the Roman Catholics and the Protestants. The Renaissance was a time where it made people look at Christian faith and notice its flaws. It made people think about the church and what it was doing. It made them think about the powers the church was abusing.